Welcome back to Headache. Let's play Higurashi, Matsuribayashi. Second record session. Wait, when did that say was? Wait, didn't click on it properly. February 14th, it's now the 1st of March, so quite a while ago. Don't know why it wasn't doing that. So we're still kind of in the intro, really. It's a very, very slow start. And you know, I find it kind of fitting, because fourth answer arc, think back to the fourth question arc, was it Himatsubushi or something like that? I forget. It was that one that had Akasaka and Oishi and Rika. They were the only real characters for the majority of it. And it was a lot shorter. And it was like, but what about everyone else? It's like, no, this was before that. Much like this was before pretty much all that as well. Sort of. It's great to see you, Koizumi-sensei. The old man sat down on the sofa with assistance from the woman. He was very old, his face was covered in wrinkles, and he could hardly do anything on his own. Instead, he still held a great deal of power and influence. Wait. Oh, that's probably Takano. Oh my, you haven't changed a bit, have you? I can see lipstick on your neck. Oh, is that right? Good grief, how embarrassing. There was no lipstick on his neck. The woman who was helping him with his wheelchair was too beautiful to be a mere helper, so Takano had suspected something. As it turned out, her guess was correct. Though he was so old that he could die the next day, he wanted to stay sexually active until the very end. I mean, there comes a time where, certain functions don't function the way they used to. So how does he deal with that? Even the Grim Reaper would think that's just absurd. Miyo-chan, you've become quite beautiful yourself. You're not a little girl anymore, eh? Oh, stop. If you really think that way, why did you try to touch my bottom, What? What have you got to lose from having an old guy like me touch your butt? I'm sure you have plenty of chances to touch the softer butt, don't you? This is, not gonna lie, this is a bit weird. Takano and the old man enjoyed tasteless conversation. They had clearly known each other a long time and were very close. It's kind of like how Mion is compared to a dirty old man, but this is an actual dirty old man. The young woman came back in to serve tea. After she left, the old man started to speak. Anyway, I'm so proud of you, Miyo-chan. I'm sure your grandfather in heaven is proud of you too. I hope so, but I'm not even close to approaching the level of my grandfather's great work. Takano-kun was unlucky in many different ways. The era he lived in. If he lived in a different era, I'm sure he would have finished his research. But he lived in that era, and ironically, that was why he noticed the existence of the Hinamizawa syndrome. The world today is in a nuclear era. America and the Soviet Union glaring at each other over mounds of nuclear stockpiles. Takes the nuke to have authority as a major power. Yet we've, however, abandoned our nukes thanks to our free anti-nuclear principles. In this age, we are now a nation without nukes. How deplorable. It's like, everyone's gotta have nukes now so that, mutually assured destruction if they were to pick a fight with each other. It's kind of crazy how that works. And it's like, yeah, the Soviet Union, that collapsed years ago, but, the tensions are still there between America and Russia. Some things never change. And I don't think Japan has nukes, even today, I don't think, that I'm aware of. I don't know. There are quite a couple of countries that do, though. In the middle of the 20th century, despite rising tensions between East and West, there was a temporary peace known as the Cold War, brought by a balance of nukes pointed at one another. Permanent memberships in the United Nations were monopolized by nations with nuclear arms. They secured their predominance with nukes, bound the world with nuclear non-proliferation treaties, eternally banning non-nuclear nations from the world stage. For Japan to become a nation that can compete with the world, it must develop nuclear arms or something as powerful. That's what some people believed, at least. I mean, come on, Japan kind of leads the way technology-wise. They freaking need nukes. I can't even tell who's talking. We don't have a character portrait. Maybe that's Takano. Realistically, Japan will never arm itself with nuclear weapons. I know, the citizens wouldn't accept it. Even if the government ignored their opinions and armed itself with nuclear weapons, it wouldn't work. By abandoning nuclear weaponry, Japan gained the deterrent power of the United States. Though some people thought the only way for Japan to become equal to the United States would be to get nuclear arms of their own. But realistically, that was impossible. Even if Japan armed itself with nuclear weapons, that wouldn't automatically let Japan join the great powers. And there's another thing, it's like, oh yeah, you'd have nuclear powers, you'd have like, yeah, you can't fuck with us, but then who would your allies be if you just like, pretty much just sticking the middle finger up at the rest of the way, like, fuck you. Takano and the old man discussed the balance of nuclear power in the world. Eventually, the sound of the cuckoo clock reminded them to return to the main subject at hand. The old man pointed to the case that had been sitting next to Takano. Takano nodded once, opened it up, and removed the contents. There were brand new bills packed in it. How much was actually in there? A bundle of brand new million-yen bills was 1 centimeter, so there must have been at least enough to make up 8 digits. Also 2 more attached cases by her side. Half an hour Takano and the old man were surprised at all. Takano closed the attached case and bowed. It's like, and then she looked down again. It's like, oh no! Oh, what country was it? Was it Zimbabwe that had like the money was pretty much worth jack shit? It's like, oh no, this is worthless. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong country. Thank you very much, Koizumi-sensei. I'll never forget about this. Money should be handled by younger people. You know, as long as they know what the fuck they're doing anyway. I can't take it to heaven with me. I just hope this will be of assistance to you. Use it wisely. Of course I will. I'll use this money only to make my grandfather's dream come true. Yes. I envy you, Takano-kun. What a wonderful grandchild he has. I'm sure he's bragging about you up there, and will soon be horrified by what you do. With all that money there, probably. I haven't done anything yet. I'll have earned his praise when I complete my grandfather's work. But you know, considering what Takano ends up doing, it's not really completing her grandfather's work, because it goes very much against it. It's just bullshit. I'm so jealous. My boys are no good. They're only interested in making money. What really matters is how the money is spent. How you contribute to the country is what's most important. It's how you pay your debt to it, you know. So his sons are probably gonna be pissed. It's like, you donated this to this freaking person. She's not even related. You know, I've always kind of thought like, the ultimate fuck you with rich people is like, if like they got like people in their family that are just waiting for them to die so they can take all the money, and they're like, fuck you, I'm sending it to charity or some shit. Well, I've always kind of envisioned a gold digger, and like when they like reach the end of their life, is like, there's something I have to tell you. It's like, what is it? You're not going to inherit the money. It's like, you son of a... Or even better, it's just like, you know, all that money that is spent over the past wonderful years I've spent with you. Yes, it wasn't real. What do you mean? I took out a lot of loans and you've got to pay it back. Yeah, it's like, fuck you. You son of a bitch! Wait, who's talking now? Oh. Oh, so are you saying that treating all those lovers so lavishly is also a way of repaying our country? Of course, when they shop, the country makes money. Money goes around, you see. So gold diggers are alright in his eyes. Whoever those lovers would probably end up buying foreign goods. Things probably don't work quite the way this old man thinks they do. Takano chuckled to herself. But the money I give to those women and the money I give you are completely different. I know that very well. You've worked very hard. You've retained trust and support from so many people. This is the first time I've mentioned it, but Hariyama-kun and Mochitsuke-kun both weren't sure about you because of your age at first. That's why I'm acknowledging your efforts. That's why I'm giving you this money. I understand. Also, for me to give you this money means that I recognize you as the official successor of Takano-kun's research. Thank you very much. Thank you for believing in me. I truly appreciate it. Oh, don't mention it. This research is Takano-kun's and yours too. You wouldn't want anyone else to take over. So thanks to all of your effort, I didn't have to spend too much time convincing the other old folks. Completing my grandfather's research is the least I can do for him. I won't begrudge any efforts towards that aim. Takano smiled as she remembered everything she had to go through to get to this point. It went without saying, but the old man around Takano saw her as someone from their grandchildren's generation, or maybe even younger. Just how much trouble did Takano have to endure in order to gain the trust of those with such a large generation gap? It was hard to describe to those who couldn't even imagine the trouble. But Takano earned it. She gathered allies, drove away enemies, gathered support, and forced them to recognize her. She spent a long time establishing trust, and rising to a status that the old men would welcome, which was all the more reason this meeting was a reward for her many days of hardship. Now that she officially had a powerful influence backing her, she could spread her wings and see the completion of her grandfather's unfinished research. Well, now that you're officially continuing Takano-kun's research, there's something I need to tell you, Miyo-chan. What is it? I'm listening. The old man paused and pulled an expensive cigarette from the cigarette holder on a table. This is like... It's like, no, when we're rich, we cannot buy anything that is cheap. We must buy the most expensive things, even if they're not really all that much better. It's just because we've got all this money, we might as well fucking use it, you know. Takano lit it up for him. She didn't smoke herself, but knowing that the old man did, she kept the lighter in her pockets. Constant build-up of little gestures like that were how she gained the trust she held today. Takano-kun noticed the Hinamizawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Yes, according to my grandfather's journal around Showa 15, he learned that many soldiers sent from Hinamizawa to the Army expressed terminal symptoms, which led to the surmise that an unknown infectious parasite dwelled in Hinamizawa. Wait, where did I say was? Wrong. Yeah. Manchuria. Let me just check something here, because I think it is, but I don't want to come across like an idiot if I'm wrong. So a moment. Yeah, I was thinking right, it is China. Of course. Under the harsh conditions of war, people sometimes lost their minds. In those conditions, those who were sent to a far-off battlefield from Hinamizawa spent their days under duress, and occasionally they exhibited terminal symptoms, hallucinated and caused twisted incidents. Well, considering some of the things that Japan did, you know, in some parts, you know, in World War II, those were pretty twisted too. Yes, that all occurred in the extensive chaos of the battlefield. Every instance was handled separately, and no one suspected there was an underlying cause. At the time, Takano-kun was working as a military physician in the Kwangtung Army. He was researching the prevention of different infectious diseases. And one day he noticed that several instances of deranged behavior were occurring among soldiers from the same hometown. He hypothesized that those symptoms were linked to those from Hinamizawa and began his own personal research. He hired soldiers from Hinamizawa's workers in his research center and studied them there. Then he learned of the unique Hinamizawa faith in Oishir-sama, and he was convinced that he found an infectious parasite with unique properties. Some may wonder how he could be so certain that these symptoms were caused by unusual parasites. Beginning of the 20th century, German doctors proved that some unknown diseases were caused by bacteria and parasites. At the time, it wasn't too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. You know what I find quite shocking about history is how kind of recent in history, it may have been, it was, a long time ago, but historically, not that long ago, where someone was like, you know what, we shouldn't be, handling bodies in the morgue and, doing operations and all that, and, not washing our hands. It's just like, what kind of preposterous notion is this? Wash our hands? Fuck that. It's just like, man, it's just like, it feels like, I don't know, as far as like medical and all that, and it just feels like humanity's advanced a lot, but at the same time it feels like there's parts where it's like, slow, and then suddenly, aha, it's just like, and then they're like, no. So then it goes back, and then it's like, oh, fuck, they were right, actually, this works. For instance, in modern times, it's been revealed that that beriberi is caused by vitamin B1 deficiency. By the start of the 20th century, many loudly proclaimed that it was the work of an unidentified pathogen. Yes, my grandfather predicted that his research would be valuable to the army, so he asked for a budget, but they just laughed at him. As a researcher, our grandfather was very talented and passionate, but when it came to gaining the aid of political powers, he simply struck out. Hinamizawa syndrome. No, the possible existence of a parasite that infected the human brain and controlled emotions, even though he made the remarkable achievement of discovering a mystery no one had explained before him. He was unable to convince others of the achievement and spent his life alone, able to garner support and unable to achieve proper recognition for his achievement. Independent research has its limits. Talented people, funding and backup. A research project can be successful only if all those things are present. Takano had known his grandfather's mistakes, and that was why she did everything she could to obtain all of that. The military at the time was hoping for a low-cost, immediate-acting weapon. While Takano-kun's research was extremely intriguing, it didn't meet the military's expectations. It's just like, I mean, it reminds me, like, reading, like, how, the Mongols, like, would throw plague-infested people over city walls and shit like that. It's just, like, creative and crazy kind of shit there. Don't know why that came to mind. What was the previous line? It's like, hey, it's just like, all our soldiers are dying of disease, throw them over the wall. That's a low-cost, immediate-acting weapon. It's like, it wasn't World War II, it was during World War I, where Spanish flu. Can you imagine if they just, like, throw them over the wall? It's just like, this isn't really helping much, because we're all just kind of dying here. But I heard you were the only one who understood my grandfather's research, weren't you? In his journal he calls you his best friend. We came from the same hometown. It was a miracle to run into someone from the same town on such a distant battlefield. Though we weren't close in age, we became very good friends. So we talked a lot. Many times he told me his research would be revolutionary, and asked me to lay the groundwork to secure funding for full-scale research. You know, I've just got a thought that I've never really thought of before. But, you know, in World War II, you know, the Allies versus Axis power. It's like you hear about the Allies, be like, okay, you'd have troops from, like, Australia, Britain, you know, and America and all that, and you'd have various, you know, people from various countries of the Allies and all that on the same battlefield working together. But I've never really thought about it, but wouldn't the same have applied to the Axis power to have Germans and Japanese on the same battlefields? I've never really thought of that till just now. I read in his journal that you talked to many different people about his research. Did I read your previous line properly? He told me his research would be revolutionary and asked me to lay the groundwork to secure funding for full-scale research. Yeah, I don't think I read all that. Unfortunately, its value was never recognized, but I'm sure your support meant a lot to him. But I was never able to really do anything for him. That's why I want to help you, Miyo-chan. Helping you is like atoning for my mistakes. Thank you very much. He was very lucky to have you as his best friend. If only there were more understanding people like you in the military's upper echelon. It's very regrettable to think that my grandfather's life might have been different. The old man closed his eyes and posed for a moment. Posed? Was the way I said that. Shortly after that, he looked on into the distance and spoke. Actually, that isn't true at all. The higher-ups were interested in Takano-kun's discovery. What? I've never heard that before. Then why didn't they support his research? Something came up, and they couldn't let him look into Hinamizawa syndrome. Only a few of the top brass and myself knew the reason. Not at all but myself a past. I think I should tell you, Miyo-chan, since you're carrying on his work. What came up? What was it? Takano had believed until this day that her grandfather's research was ridiculed by everyone, which was the reason why it had never gained any recognition. Her grandfather had asked the military for funding so he could uncover the secret of Hinamizawa syndrome during the war. But just like the old man had said earlier, the military wanted an instant-acting weapon. That's why they weren't interested in his research. That's what she had believed. But as it turned out, the military had actually shown an interest after all. Before I go on, I need to explain about the Kwantung Army in Manchuria at the time. While the Kwantung Army was stationed in Manchuria, opinions were divided on whether to advance our forces north or south. At the time, Japan had troops in Manchuria, but opinions were divided on advancing north to deter the Soviet Union, advancing south to expand our territory and secure resources. You know, but it's just like in the previous part, the previous record session, like I uploaded it the other day, and like seeing the dialogue again, that guy was like, I will become Prime Minister, you will support me, and we will do this. It's like, you know, back during the 20th century, those Western bastards, they were like, they all colonized all these various Asian countries, and you know, fair points. Fair points. That was indeed a thing. You know, a lot of colonization bollocks going on, you know, throughout, you know, various centuries. But then you think about it, Japan pretty much invaded them and is not exactly freeing them. It's just like, no, now you belong to us, bitch. It's like, you damn hypocritical politician, man. The Soviet Union, as predecessor of Russia, being a landlocked, frozen nation, they had long yearned for an ice-free port that wouldn't freeze over in winter. They'd made numerous attempts to expand the territory southward too. Those expansionist policies were said to be a cause of the Russo-Japanese War. What was that? I'm just picturing this, just like, so Russia, why do you keep trying to, get more land? It's like, it's not that we need more land. I mean, look, we got all this land. It's just We could do with a bit of land that's, not covered in fucking snow and ice and, uninhabitable because of it. In the history books, it's said that Japan won the Russo-Japanese War, but it was actually a draw ending in peace signed at the Treaty of Portsmouth. That's kind of a common thing. Like, well, they say history is, written by the victors, but sometimes, it'd be like, no. No, we're gonna tell it a little differently. We didn't lose that one. We won, in fact. But actual fact, it was a draw. Both sides had simply set aside their spears after mutually exhausting their forces. Wasn't like Russia capitulated and offered a complete surrender. As a result, the perception of the Russian threat continued to swallow. Later, the Russian Empire was suffering by a revolution, but Japan was unable to shake the threat that the new Soviet Union would advance south. I'm gonna assume this is maybe Takano, because why would this guy be saying, according to history books, Japan went south. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and abandoned Northern advance. As a result, when the Great Patriotic War began, the Soviet Union was able to respond to pressure on their German front by pouring in their eastern forces. Though the Germans had managed to lay siege to Moscow, the Soviets launched a massive counter-offense that reversed the tides of war. Even with the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, Soviets couldn't tell if Japan would attack them at some point. Because of that threat, the Soviets had to leave some forces in the Far East, and then weren't able to devote enough troops to the German front. Started the Soviets had forged the German-Soviet non-aggression pact too. Yet Germany broke the treaty and attacked the Soviet Union. Big mistake. To make matters worse, Japan and Germany had forged a military alliance. With all those factors in play, the Soviets naturally couldn't trust Japan to uphold their neutrality pact. Ironically, the Soviet Union was the one who broke the pact, but I won't go into that now. What is that? Is that a note from the author here, the writer? 7 expansion. Or Rikushi 7. I think this is the name. Exactly. Hitler signed the tripartite whatever pact because he expected Japan to keep the Soviets on the front in check. But ultimately, Japan abandoned North. With a superior German offensive, many supported the idea of waiting and watching it play out. They believed that even if we did advance north, it would be after Germany conquered Moscow. However, that plan was exposed to Sorge, and the Soviets transferred their heavy tanks from the Far East border to the German front. That secured Germany's defeat at Moscow, and the Germans began seeing a string of defeats, starting with the Battle of Kursk. It was a turning point in history, huh? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was recognized as a global power, but at least in Shah 15, the Kuomintang army didn't think it was a particular threat. Japan had earned a victory with the Russo-Japanese War, and they took the new Soviet Union government lightly, assuming it wouldn't be stable after overthrowing the Russian Empire. That underestimation was corrected after the Nomonhan incident in Shah 16. After several fierce short-term battles with the Soviet Union's advanced mechanized corps that led to great losses, the Kuomintang army realized they shouldn't fight the Soviets, and that inclined Japan towards the Soviet-Japanese neutrality pacts. And that's kind of a common thing in history a bit, isn't it? It's like, don't pick fights with Russia. It's a big-ass place. And yeah. And regardless of the country, don't underestimate it. A country that you're, fighting against. Underestimate them is gonna, make it so that they can blindside you and be like, fuck, why didn't we take them a bit more serious, guys? Who's talking now? Gonna assume the old guy. At the very least, up until the Nomonhan incident, the Kuomintang army was strongly conscious of the Soviets and divided on advancing north or south. Thanks to that, there were also voices advising caution, suggesting we avoid all-out war with China in order to shore up our forces against the Soviets. But the Sino-Japanese War broke out after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, right? July, shower 12. History lesson. The Japanese and Chinese armies were staring at each other across the Lugo Bridge in Beijing. It was the middle of the night on July 7th. The Chinese army fired on the Japanese army in training and they engaged in combat. This triggered the long Sino-Japanese War. Is that how it started? It's just like, I'm not really into Star Wars, but, you know, there's that whole kind of a meme in a way. It's like, okay, who shot first, Solo or the alien guy? It's like, the alien guy has a name. It's like that. It's like, oh, China shot first. Yes, according to historical records, that incident triggered the Sino. No, I'm still confused. Who's speaking here? Was it Takano that said? Yes, it might be the old guy. Yes, according to historical records, that incident triggered the Sino-Japanese War. But with opinions divided over advancing north or south, the army was equally divided over a full-scale confrontation with China. Though in fact we even received orders from General Staff Headquarters to resolve the matter quietly before the incident grew much bigger. So those supporting the northern advance wanted to settle the Battle of Lugo Bridge quietly, insisting that conflict with China was pointless in light of their anti-Soviet strategy. However, those on the mainland supporting the southern advance used this incident as cause to dispatch more troops to China. They enacted hard policies against China, and thus the Marco Polo Bridge incident became the trigger for Japan and China to enter all-out war. After that and their bitter struggles in the Normanhan incident, Japan greatly revised their Soviet strategy, signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, and secured the route for their southern advance. The Sino-Japanese War got worse and worse. So, was it more or less like, okay, Russia, we cool if we just, fight in your, like, I mean, we're not in your backyard, but we're kind of like, well, if it took place in the south, then that wouldn't be near Russia, but I'm confused by all this. I gotta be honest though, my knowledge of World War II when it comes to, Asia is kind of limited to, the whole, nuclear bombs being dropped, and the raping of Nanking, I think it was called. Kind of know about that, and like some of the other shady stuff that I think some Japanese did in Australia, I think, during World War II. I don't really know. I should probably brush up a bit on, the Asian side of World War II, because, being from the UK, it's obviously going to be focused more on, the European side of things. The Blitz, the shits. If the Marco Polo Bridge incident hadn't happened, it's possible that history would have gone very differently. Maybe we would have ended up in a war with them anyway. However, if the South faction didn't get that chance, the military authorities would have kept restraining the Soviet Union, and the Soviets would have had to divide their forces between East and West. And maybe Germany would have invaded Moscow. Then Japan could have gone to Siberia. The map could have been very different today. Germany wouldn't necessarily have won the war if it had succeeded in taking Moscow. England was keeping its strength on the other side of Devitt Straits after all, and the United States was poised to enter the conflict. Yeah, England was keeping its strength. It's like, just leave out Scotland, Wales and all that. Yeah, fuck those. They didn't help at all, right? No, they did. Just Britain was keeping its strength. You know, why is it always got to just be England? Sure, England is pretty much the closest to the European continent itself, so I guess it makes sense. But it's a joint effort, man. Besides, Napoleon once occupied Moscow, but in the end he couldn't bear their winter and had to withdraw. He's like, oh, it's a bit chilly here, fuck this, you can have it back. We're leaving. It's one of those ifs, huh? The Axis might have won the war. Yes, it's possible that the gunshot from the Marco Polo Bridge incident changed the tide of history. I think there's plenty of moments in World War II that, if had gone different, would have changed things dramatically, potentially, you know, like a kind of butterfly effect. It's like, pretty much anything, like, kind of like, look back on World War II, it's like, if this was like, you know, if this was affected in the war, and in actuality it was unaffected, it's like, that changed the tide of the war greatly. It's like, just little things could have, like, nudged in a completely different direction. For all, I mean, maybe it could have ended in a stalemate even, which would be a bit awkward after all that, wouldn't it? You'd be like, okay, what the fuck? Both sides had different opinions of who fired the shot, right? According to the Japanese side, a Chinese soldier fired a shot at a Japanese soldier who got too close to the Chinese camp. However, the Chinese claimed the shot was a conspiracy invented by the Japanese military. I mean, who could you really believe that? It's like, yeah, it could have been I'll wait, really. It's like, did Japan shoot first or China? Which one? Who knows, because they're both claiming that the other was the first one to shoot. It's like, no, he started, no. It's like the equivalent of two people just pointing at each other. No, he did it. No, he did it. No, he did it. No, it was him. It was him. No, it was you. But the shot was fired. Even though nobody knew who actually pulled the trigger, it sparked the Sino-Japanese War. What if it wasn't even a human being? It was just like an animal passing by, happens to actually set off a trigger on something that fires around at somebody's like, hey, you! And then they start like, ah! That would be quite something. Yes, that's what the history books say. But Koizumi-sensei... No. Oh wait, no, got it wrong. That shot was fired even though nobody knew who actually pulled the trigger. It sparked the Sino-Japanese War. Yes, that's what the history books say. But Koizumi-sensei, what does that have to do with my grandfather? In the Marco Polo Bridge incident, a shot was fired at a unit that was training in the middle of the night. Everyone was summoned for a roll call. They were missing one soldier. I can see where this is probably going then. Soldier came back later and said that he was sent as a messenger and got too close to the Chinese camp. By the way, did you know that soldier was from Hinamizawa? It's like, so it was Japan that shot first. It was a guy from Hinamizawa. Technically a fictional place. Hey, really? When Takano-kun was talking about Hinamizawa syndrome, he said that soldiers from Hinamizawa could suddenly fall into a deranged state. And we realized that the soldier from the Marco Polo Bridge incident was in fact from Hinamizawa. Then what about the first shot fired? I don't know the truth, but I think it's possible. That it's a possible? That is a possibility that a soldier within the terminal stage of Hinamizawa's syndrome fired the shot. That soldier was killed in the incident. Since there was no record of it, nobody knows exactly how he died. The Japanese side claimed that the Chinese army had fired at them and negotiated with that in mind. Just a scant few days after the incident, Japan demanded an apology from the Chinese and as a show forced to dispatch 3 divisions of reinforcements. It's like, how dare you accuse us? It's like, give us an apology, and then a few days later it's like, okay, so dispatch divisions, reinforcements. It's like, this isn't going very well, is it? The Chinese side was, of course, opposed to that. The situation escalated at once. If research into the Hinamizawa syndrome continued, the higher-ups thought it would negatively influence the Japanese army's claims. So in order to avoid the risk of traversing that political grey zone, they rejected Takano-kun's research. So because of that, they refused to even consider my grandfather's research long after the war ended too. Wait, really? Yes, that's exactly it. The war is over now, but there are still some conflicts there regarding historical recognition. Even if Takano-kun didn't mean for it to happen. If his research into Hinamizawa syndrome became public, it might cause a resurgence of quarrels over the long-ended war. Certain authorities were afraid of that, so they made sure his research was ignored even after the war. I was long waiting not to aid him anyway myself. Warned, I mean. Nagna tried to remain calm, but she couldn't help herself from grimacing. She had just found out the real reason why her grandfather's research had been ignored. It was because of secret maneuvers by political masterminds. Those masterminds feared it so much, ironically, that meant they acknowledged the importance of his research. Takano was saddened and frustrated no end by her grandfather's lonely life. However, they are all dead now. I'm the only one who knows about this. Takano-kun was still alive. I was going to apologize to him and give him my unconditional support. But he's no longer around. That's why I'm apologizing to you and offering to give you my full support instead. Are you sure? Wouldn't research into the Hinamizawa syndrome dredge up those same subjects again? It's different now. Besides, research into the Hinamizawa syndrome may produce more than a mere local disease. Depending on your research, post-war Japan may gain a trump card that makes it a world power once again. So the tides and times have changed then? That's right. Unfortunately, Takano-kun didn't live long enough to see that tide change. But he has you to continue his research. So as long as I'm alive, I'll give you my full support. I promised to help Takano-kun, but because of various things, I couldn't do anything. So I want to make up for that as long as I'm alive. I think that's the least I can do for the man who called me his best friend. Koizumi-sensei, thank you so much. Oh, don't mention it. I'm glad I was able to tell you everything before I died. Anyway, until I'm gone, I'll make sure you get everything you need, okay? So if anything comes up, be sure to let me know. I'll do anything for you, and then... and he just dies right there. It's like, oh. Takano couldn't even imagine what kind of bond this old man and her grandfather had between them. You know, there's this, like, oh, they're from the same town, but what town? We don't get any name for that. I mean, I guess it's because it's like, I don't know, they kind of like have a fictional setting. It's like it takes place in Japan, Hinamizawa, not a real place, although the images are taken of a real village, and, well, all the images really are, you know, real places. There's this one specific village, but it's not like, that's Hinamizawa in real life. That's just Hinamizawa where they took the pictures for their, you know... I forget what the village is even called. I think they actually have, like, statues of the characters there as well, which is interesting. And... But yeah, it's like, it's a real village, but Hinamizawa itself is fictional. And I think Shishibone might also be fictional as well. I think, maybe. I'm not completely sure on that, so don't quote me on that. I think the same with Okime, but don't quote me on that either. I don't really know. But it feels like, you know, they were kind of like, no, let's make it a fictional setting. For the most part. Or maybe not. I don't know. I find it all a bit confusing. But, yeah. I couldn't even imagine what blah, 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 blah. Wait, did I read all that? Always happens. Then I couldn't even imagine what kind of bond his own man had between them, but thanks to that bond, Takano was able to gain a powerful supporter. Tears welled up in Takano's eyes as she gave him an emotional look, but in her mind she was practically dancing at the promise of the old man's full support. The old man and Takano both bowed at the same time to show each other their appreciation. Once that was done, the old man became a little more serious. After that far too lengthy preamble, he finally said what he really wanted to tell her. So there you have it. That is what I wanted to say. Now fuck off. Anyway, oh no. The Hinamizawa syndrome has the potential power to make history. May even twist the fate of our country. So keep that in mind and be careful with your research.